Mistress forced the pregnant wife to leave Millionaire. 7 years later, the wife returns aggressively. Patricia Carlisle's heart pounded as she stepped off the plane, the memory of her once grand life still burning in her mind. 7 years ago, she had been cast aside by her own husband, Maxwell Lightwood, enchanted by a ruthless mistress who would stop at nothing to steal what Patricia cherished most. Once forced to flee while pregnant and destitute, Patricia has spent every moment since silently gathering her strength. Now, she's returned to a city that once scoffed at her. An undercurrent of fierce determination glimmers in her eyes. Revenge isn't simply an option, it's her destiny. And for those who wronged her, the final reckoning has only just begun. Patricia Carlisle was never one to believe in miracles, but even she had to admit that meeting Maxwell Lightwood felt like fate. Born into a modest household on the outskirts of Melbourne, Patricia had worked tirelessly to support her aging parents while juggling a part-time job and a college education. She dreamed of traveling the world someday, of forging her own destiny beyond the constraints of her simple upbringing. Her life took an unexpected turn one sweltering summer evening. She attended a charity gala at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Singapore, having received a scholarship invitation to share her academic research on supporting underprivileged women in Southeast Asia. The event was an elite affair, gilded decor, glittering chandeliers, and an abundance of finely dressed guests who glided across the marble floors as though they owned the entire universe. Patricia, in her second-hand gown, felt out of place, but she reminded herself that this was a chance to raise awareness for a cause close to her heart. She stood by the refreshment table, silently rehearsing her speech, when Maxwell Lightwood swept onto the scene. She remembered that moment vividly, as though it had been seared into her brain. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an air of serene confidence that seemed to part the crowd effortlessly. He was smiling at someone's joke, but the moment his gaze landed on Patricia, it was like the room became a tunnel. She was the only person left in his line of vision. "Hi," he said, approaching her with a slight tilt of his head. "I'm Maxwell. Is this your first time at one of these events?" Nodding, Patricia felt her cheeks flush. "Yes. I'm here as a scholarship recipient. I'm supposed to talk about my community initiatives." Their conversation stretched on for nearly half an hour, weaving from her charitable work to his surprising humility despite inheriting a significant trust fund. Maxwell revealed that he was in the tech sector, pioneering a new form of data security software that already had major investors salivating. He came off as the perfect blend of intelligence and warmth, cutting through Patricia's initial nerves with an easy sense of humor. By the time they parted ways that night, Patricia was enthralled. Maxwell, equally captivated, offered to keep in touch. For Patricia, who had never been courted by someone so effortlessly sophisticated, it felt like stepping into a fairy tale, though caution nagged at her. She'd seen enough heartbreak around her to know that appearances could be deceiving. They exchanged contact information, and over the next few weeks, Maxwell persistently reached out. He sent her articles he thought she'd find interesting, recommendations on philanthropic projects she might support, and playful texts asking about her day. His thoughtfulness surprised her. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't, but it certainly made her feel special. Several months passed in a blur of excitement as Maxwell pulled Patricia into his glamorous orbit. Their dates were a parade of wonders: private rooftop dinners, art gallery premieres, exclusive yacht parties. Yet, the moments that resonated most with Patricia were quieter long walks in the park, heartfelt conversations about their shared dreams, nights spent volunteering at local shelters. Maxwell seemed to reveal facets of himself that the public never saw. Slowly, Patricia found herself falling in love. She told herself that if it was all a dream, she'd rather enjoy it while it lasted than question its authenticity. When Maxwell proposed, he did it in an intimate setting, the small cafe where they had shared their first official date. Patricia, tears in her eyes, said yes without hesitation. In the hush of that evening, with the lights of the city twinkling outside the window, she felt secure in her decision. This was a man who understood her, respected her, and wanted to build a life with her. She thought it was enough, more than enough. Little did she know just how fragile that promise would become. The wedding took place at a lavish villa overlooking Lake Como in Italy. In line with Maxwell's status, the day was a glittering spectacle filled with A-list guests, high-profile entrepreneurs, and even a minor European royal or two. Patricia's simple background didn't matter there, or so she believed. She wore a sleek, custom-made gown courtesy of Maxwell and glowed with the joy that only love could produce. Cameras flashed, guests clinked champagne glasses, and a string quartet played soft music as the newlyweds exchanged vows under an arch of white roses. However, amid the laughter and celebration, subtle tensions emerged. Patricia noticed Maxwell's father, Harrison Lightwood, eyeing her with a hint of disapproval. The elder Lightwood was a powerful figure who had invested heavily in Maxwell's business. He never openly insulted Patricia, but she felt his reluctance, as if marrying a middle-class scholarship student was an insult to the Lightwood dynasty. Maxwell, oblivious or unbothered, kept reassuring her. "My father is old-fashioned, but he'll come around." He brushed aside her concerns, focusing instead on the new chapter they were about to start together. Patricia wanted to believe him. After all, no family was without its skeptics and flaws. She imagined that, with time, her devotion to Maxwell and her own charitable work would make his family see her as a valuable addition. Life in Singapore, where they decided to settle, became a swirl of extravagance. Maxwell's business soared, pulling in bigger deals, forging new partnerships, and catapulting him into the upper echelons of industry stardom. Meanwhile, Patricia, always the compassionate soul, leveraged her position to champion philanthropic causes. She organized galas to raise scholarship funds for young women, founded reading programs in underprivileged neighborhoods, and volunteered at women's shelters. Though the tabloids fixated on her new wealth, Patricia cared more about making a tangible difference. The couple became a beloved figure in the media, a portrait of success and benevolence. Yet one element of the fairy tale never quite clicked. Maxwell's father remained an enigma. During formal gatherings, Harrison would greet Patricia politely but maintain a distance, as though waiting for her to prove her worth or fail at it. Maxwell shrugged off Patricia's worries, describing his father as a cantankerous old hawk who simply took time to warm up. Patricia tried to push aside her unease. Then came the day everything changed. It was a sweltering afternoon in July when Maxwell arrived home with a bundle of documents and a broad smile. He had hired a new business manager, someone who had purportedly worked wonders for another major corporation. Her name was Crystal Hartley. Maxwell wanted Patricia to meet her personally, hoping they would become fast friends, and that Patricia's philanthropic background would mesh well with Crystal's business acumen. Patricia, unsuspecting, agreed to welcome Crystal into their world, oblivious that she was about to open the door to a serpent that would shatter her marriage into pieces. Crystal Hartley was a stunning woman in her late 20s, with hair so glossy it looked polished under the sunlight. She moved with a confident swiftness that suggested she was perpetually in control. Within days of her hiring, she had reorganized Maxwell's travel itineraries, refined the company's marketing strategy, and subtly inserted herself into top-level negotiations. Even Maxwell, who prided himself on discerning good talent, seemed slightly in awe of her. To Patricia's face, Crystal was sugary sweet. "I've heard so much about your philanthropic initiatives." She gushed, her wide eyes brimming with admiration. "I'd love to help out sometime. Maybe we can collaborate on a fundraiser?" Patricia forced a smile of her own, unsettled by something intangible. It was not jealousy. Patricia had no reason to suspect Maxwell's loyalty. It was more a sense of quiet dread, an instinctive wariness. Crystal's kindness felt overcalculated. The way she spoke gave the impression of a performance meticulously rehearsed. Still, Patricia pushed aside her nagging feelings. She had no wish to be labeled paranoid. Instead, she maintained a cordial relationship with Crystal, inviting her to a few of her charitable events. The new business manager lavished attention, praising Patricia's generosity and offering to handle finances to ensure maximum impact. Patricia, naive to Crystal's manipulations, found herself half relieved. Perhaps Maxwell's instincts about Crystal were correct. Maybe she really was a capable, well-connected asset. Yet, small oddities emerged. Maxwell began returning home later than usual. At first, it was attributed to a rash of emergency meetings to finalize deals with overseas investors. Then there were business trips that couldn't be rescheduled, some lasting longer than planned. Whenever Patricia asked for details, Maxwell would wave them off and say, "It's all in Crystal's domain. She's a genius at managing these details." Patricia tried to remain supportive. She, too, had charity galas to oversee. She convinced herself that Maxwell needed her trust, not her suspicion. However, her doubts crystallized one night when she found a lipstick stain on Maxwell's shirt collar, certainly not her shade. She sat up in their bed, turning the collar over in trembling hands. Maxwell, half asleep, mumbled an incoherent apology about someone at a meeting hugging him. Patricia felt a chill seep into her bones. Deep down, she feared the worst but was terrified of confrontation. As more weeks passed, Patricia observed a peculiar shift in her social circles. Some of her acquaintances, particularly those in Maxwell's immediate business sphere, grew more distant. At gatherings, a few of them would exchange covert glances as soon as Patricia approached. Whenever Crystal was around, she made sure to loop herself in Maxwell's conversation, physically placing herself between him and Patricia. The subtle microaggressions multiplied. Patricia, once cheerful and outgoing, found herself retreating into silence, daunted by the swirling rumors and the sense that something was being orchestrated behind her back. One day, after returning from a charity drive, she spotted Maxwell and Crystal standing intimately close in the foyer of their home. They stepped apart the moment she entered. Maxwell fumbled with an explanation about verifying some documents. Crystal smiled as though nothing were amiss. That smile seared a dreadful certainty into Patricia's heart. Crystal wasn't just a business manager. She was a threat, a predator lying in wait. Yet Patricia was pregnant by then, 8 weeks along, unbeknownst even to Maxwell. She had planned to surprise him with the news after confirming that the baby was healthy. In a cruel twist, she now found herself uncertain about how or when to break this life-altering news. The swirling chaos around Crystal and Maxwell left her feeling vulnerable. But she believed that having a child might ground Maxwell, bringing him back to the family life they had promised each other. It was a tenuous hope, yet it was the only one she had left. It was a crisp evening when Patricia decided she could no longer carry the news of her pregnancy alone. She dressed carefully for dinner, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. If Maxwell was somehow compromised by Crystal, Patricia wanted to believe that the revelation of a baby would make him see sense. Parenthood had a way of sobering even the most misguided. She told herself that Maxwell was a good man at heart, that maybe everything she had been suspecting was a distorted fear. She never got the chance to deliver the news in a romantic setting. Instead, fate intervened in the cruelest way. Patricia arrived at Maxwell's corporate office that same night with a small gift bag containing baby booties and a note that read, "You're going to be a dad." She walked with purposeful strides, ignoring the prying eyes of the night staff who recognized her. Guided by a receptionist to Maxwell's private suite, Patricia froze at the door. Through the narrow glass pane, she saw Maxwell pressed against Crystal, their faces dangerously close. The tension in the air was unmistakable, hands entangled, clothes slightly disheveled. Patricia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She stood numbly, fighting the urge to collapse. She was pregnant, and her husband was in the arms of another woman. Summoning what strength she had left, Patricia pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her was a dagger to her heart. Crystal stepped back, adjusting her blouse with an infuriating calm. Maxwell, flushed and stuttering, tried to offer excuses. Patricia's fists clenched around the gift bag until the cardboard crumpled. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence was deafening. Patricia forced her gaze onto Maxwell, tears threatening to spill. "I came here to tell you something," she whispered, voice trembling. "But I guess there's nothing left to say." Maxwell's eyes flicked to the gift bag in her hands, noticing the baby booties poking out. His expression twisted in shock and possibly guilt. He reached toward Patricia, stammering an apology, but Crystal's hand on his shoulder betrayed her unwavering hold. Patricia felt her stomach churn at the sight. They were a united front, and she was the outsider in her own marriage. Unable to stomach any more, Patricia pivoted and ran from the office suite. The sound of Maxwell calling her name echoed behind her, but she didn't stop. She fled into the night, tears streaming, consumed by disbelief. In the cab ride home, she clutched her abdomen, terrified that the baby would sense her anguish. She knew that if she stayed in that mansion with a cheating husband and a manipulative mistress, her emotional and physical well-being and her babies would be at risk. That night, she made the decision to walk away, though she wasn't sure how or where she would go. All she knew was that she would not subject herself to further humiliation. Patricia's intent was to confront Maxwell in private, to see if there was any shred of remorse or any possibility of salvage. She returned to the mansion, pacing by the living room windows, tears dried into silent fury. When Maxwell finally arrived, hours later, Patricia felt her stomach clench. He strode in, shirt rumpled, eyes laced with guilt and panic. "Patricia," he murmured, approaching her with outstretched hands. "I messed up." She stepped back, a cold lump forming in her chest. "Stop. Before you say anything, I want to know why. And I want to know if you're still the man I thought I married." He tried to explain that the kiss was a moment of weakness, something that happened spontaneously. But each half-hearted excuse only made Patricia's pain burn deeper. She calmly informed him of her pregnancy, dropping the revelation like a gauntlet between them. Maxwell's face paled, and for a brief second, Patricia thought he would fall to his knees with contrition. But before he could respond, Crystal Hartley waltzed into the foyer uninvited, as though she owned the place. Patricia's rage erupted. "Why are you here?" she demanded, voice shaking. "I'm here because Maxwell needs someone who actually supports his vision," Crystal replied, coolly, ignoring Maxwell's feeble attempts to hush her. "I gave up my own comfort to ensure his business soared, and from what I see, you've done nothing but cling to your philanthropic illusions." Patricia's eyes flashed, but she forced herself to remain collected. "Get out! This is my home!" Crystal laughed mirthlessly. "Not for long, darling. You don't have what it takes to stay by his side." The confrontation escalated, with Maxwell pathetically shuffling between them like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. Patricia demanded that he make a choice, an ultimatum that hovered in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. And the unthinkable happened. Maxwell didn't ask Crystal to leave. He didn't reassure Patricia of his love. Instead, he hung his head and mumbled that he needed time to sort this out. That was all the confirmation Patricia needed. She glared at them both, heartbreak fueling her voice. "You've made your choice already. I might be pregnant, but I refuse to be pitied or toyed with. I'm leaving." She stormed upstairs to pack a small suitcase, tears of rage and despair streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't fathom how Maxwell, the man who had once professed unbreakable devotion, could stand there silently while she was forced out. Within an hour, she was gone into the night, disoriented by heartbreak, yet guided by the instinct to protect the new life growing within her. She left behind the designer gowns, the glittering jewelry, the illusions of happily ever after. All that mattered now was her unborn baby. The first few weeks in exile were brutal. Patricia found temporary lodging in a cramped studio apartment. Barely furnished, it had a musty smell and a single window that overlooked a bustling street where vendors shouted their wares day and night. She lived off her modest savings, refusing to touch Maxwell's bank accounts or accept any hush money. Pride was all she had left, and she clung to it with every fiber of her being. Meanwhile, her pregnancy progressed. Morning sickness struck with a vengeance, compounding her emotional turmoil. But even more challenging was the tidal wave of rumors that began circulating. Gossip magazines picked up on the scandal, printing headlines like "Pregnant Wife Flees Tech Mogul Mystery Mistress Takes Her Place." Former acquaintances, especially those loyal to Maxwell or enchanted by his wealth, began to treat Patricia like a social pariah. While a few old friends reached out in solidarity, many were too frightened to oppose the powerful Lightwood name, which Crystal was deftly wielding like a sledgehammer. Despite her isolation, Patricia discovered a new wellspring of determination. She found a job as an administrative assistant at a small financial firm, using her college background and her philanthropic organizing skills to keep the job afloat. She learned how to track budgets, coordinate events, and handle marketing tasks. Slowly but surely, the old confidence began to reawaken. She wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor. Several times, she considered returning to Maxwell for the sake of her unborn child. But each time, the memory of his silent complicity and the sight of Crystal smirking in their foyer steeled her resolve to remain independent. She wanted no part of the deception, no part of the wealth that felt tainted by betrayal. Around her third month of pregnancy, Patricia decided to channel her heartbreak into a new project. She had always dreamed of launching a small business that combined her philanthropic ideals with sustainable products. With what little money she had saved and the moral support of her one close friend, Lillian, she set up an online store selling eco-friendly baby items. It started small, mostly curated products from local artisans. Patricia named it Elijah and Eden, though she kept her reasons for the name private at the time. She felt a strong pull toward the name Elijah, as if it were a sign for her future son. The store gained modest traction. Patricia poured her spare hours into learning social media marketing, forging relationships with suppliers, and refining the brand's identity. Though physically drained by her pregnancy, she found solace in building something new, something that was entirely hers, untainted by betrayal. At every prenatal appointment, Patricia marveled at the life growing inside her. She would gently place a hand on her belly and promise her baby that she would protect him at all costs. That vow, more than anything else, galvanized her. She refused to let Maxwell's betrayal rob her of her capacity to love and nurture. What she didn't realize then was that her small online store born from heartbreak would soon become the catalyst that propelled her back into the world of the Lightwoods with a vengeance. 2 years passed quietly. Patricia gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Elijah. From the moment she held him, her heart overflowed with a sense of purpose unlike anything she had felt before. The exhaustion of single parenthood was grueling, but each time Elijah cooed or curled his tiny fingers around hers, the weight lifted. Raising Elijah wasn't easy in her cramped apartment. Juggling bills and part-time remote work for the financial firm, but Patricia managed. Elijah and Eden continued to grow, albeit slowly. Word-of-mouth referrals and glowing customer reviews drove a trickle of steady orders. Patricia prided herself on top-notch customer service, personally responding to inquiries and packaging orders with care. She also expanded her reach by collaborating with local maternity groups, hosting pop-up stalls at markets, and forging alliances with like-minded entrepreneurs. During this time, Maxwell Lightwood's empire expanded at a dizzying pace. Articles detailing his groundbreaking software acquisitions and partnerships with international conglomerates dominated business news. The tabloids occasionally mentioned his personal life, usually accompanied by photos of Crystal Hartley on his arm at Gallus. They were the perfect power couple in the public's eye. Rarely was Patricia's name invoked, unless in passing references to an unfortunate broken union. But behind the glitz, there were whispers, that Maxwell's father, Harrison Lightwood, privately disapproved of Crystal and her controlling influence. More alarmingly, certain business insiders claimed that Crystal was siphoning funds or leveraging Maxwell's name to secure side deals. Nothing was confirmed, but Patricia couldn't help reading every snippet of gossip with a conflicting sense of dread and satisfaction. Had Maxwell truly found solace with a woman who was now betraying him too? One late evening, Patricia received a shocking phone call. It was from an anonymous number, but the voice on the other end was distinctly female and trembling. I have information," the caller stammered. "Crystal Hartley is digging into your past. She's seeking anything to discredit you, especially rumors that you had some financial improprieties at your old job. She wants to shut down Elijah and Eden." Patricia's stomach twisted. Who was this caller? She pressed for details, but the line went dead. Panic set in. She had done nothing illegal, but she feared that a cunning manipulator like Crystal might manufacture fake documents to tarnish her fledgling business. As Patricia cradled Elijah in her arms that night, she wondered if her best course of action was to keep her head down and continue building her company quietly, or if she should prepare for a more direct confrontation. She was about to find out that sometimes fate doesn't wait for you to choose. Fate rushes forward, forcing your hand. The price of passivity would soon become too high. Patricia's next great turning point came unexpectedly when the management of a major retail chain discovered Elijah and Eden through a lifestyle blogger's glowing review. The company approached Patricia about a potential partnership, impressed by her store's emphasis on sustainability and maternal well-being. If she could seal this deal, it would catapult Elijah and Eden onto shelves nationwide, providing the financial stability she desperately needed. However, the catch was significant. The retailer was partially funded by Maxwell's conglomerate. Patricia discovered this in the final rounds of negotiation, when the chain's executive mentioned that their expansion budget was covered by the Lightwood Group, among others. Instantly, Patricia's heart thudded. Entering a partnership would mean dancing perilously close to Maxwell's orbit, a place she had fought so hard to escape. She weighed her options, discussing them with Lillian, who had become not just a friend, but a confidant and part-time business advisor. "If you don't take the deal, you'll be passing up on a life-changing opportunity," Lillian cautioned. "But if you do, you risk crossing paths with Maxwell and Crystal again." Patricia mused over it for days. She paced in her apartment, scanning Elijah's sleeping form, her mind swirling with the possibility of a brighter future for her son. Eventually, her resolve sharpened. She couldn't let fear dictate her life. If Maxwell or Crystal tried to undermine her, she would fight back. After all, she had built Elijah and Eden from nothing. She wasn't a helpless victim anymore. She was a mother on a mission. Thus, Patricia signed the preliminary agreement with the retail chain, setting a formal meeting to finalize distribution terms. She steeled herself for the possibility of encountering Maxwell. If that happened, she would face him with her head held high, no longer the naive young bride, but a determined entrepreneur who would guard her child's future at any cost. The conference room in the retailer's skyscraper headquarters was flooded with natural light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's skyline, while a state-of-the-art digital presentation board loomed at the front. Patricia arrived early, her mind churning with last-minute adjustments to her pitch. She wore a fitted navy suit that exuded confidence and practicality, exactly how she felt inside. One by one, executives trickled in. They greeted Patricia with polite nods, some offering compliments about her brand's progress. Patricia smiled, though a hint of nervousness lingered in her chest. The minutes ticked by, and she kept an eye on the door. She had been assured Maxwell wouldn't be directly involved, yet the Lightwood name was omnipresent. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the main door swung open. In walked Maxwell Lightwood, exuding the same magnetic charisma that once made Patricia's heart flutter. A hush settled over the room as everyone turned to look, uncertain whether to stand or remain seated. Maxwell paused, scanning the faces. The moment his gaze locked onto Patricia, time seemed to slow. "Patricia," he said quietly, as though trying to keep his composure. She noticed his jaw clench, and she could almost sense the swirl of regret in his eyes. The sight of him standing there older, perhaps a bit wearier, sent a flood of memories crashing back. Their first dance at the charity gala, the wedding vows by Lake Como, the heartbreak of that office betrayal. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "This is a surprise," Patricia managed to say, keeping her tone professional. "I was told the Lightwood Group's direct involvement in these negotiations was minimal." He offered a tight nod. "I usually don't attend these smaller distribution meetings, but I insisted on seeing how the brand that everyone's been raving about would present itself." His words held a double meaning. Patricia recognized that, to him, it wasn't just a brand. It was her brand. She took a seat at the head of the table, flipping through her slides to begin. Maxwell sat at the opposite end, posture stiff. The tension in the air felt like a drawn bowstring, ready to snap. The meeting proceeded formally, with Patricia walking the executives through product lines, supply chain logistics, marketing strategies, and brand vision. Her voice never wavered. She had rehearsed the pitch 100 times. Although she could feel Maxwell's stare on her like a burning spotlight, she refused to falter. When it ended, the board erupted in applause. Contracts were handed around for review, and the executives commended Patricia on her thoroughness. Maxwell remained silent for a long moment before clearing his throat. "The Lightwood Group is prepared to support the expansion, assuming all conditions are met. I must commend Miss Carlyle on her impressive growth strategy." Miss Carlyle. He used her maiden name. A small pang shot through Patricia's chest at the reminder of how everything had changed. She thanked him curtly, and just as she was about to gather her materials, Maxwell stepped over. "Could I have a word?" he asked softly, mindful of the ears around them. Patricia hesitated. The last thing she wanted was a scene. The other executives were already starting to filter out, so she nodded. "Make it quick." They ended up in a quiet corridor near the vending machines. An awkward, suffocating silence thickened between them. Maxwell was the first to speak. "I heard rumors about you, about the child. She cut him off, voice edged with steel. "His name is Elijah. He's 4 now." Maxwell exhaled, pressing his lips together. 4, he repeated, as though absorbing the fact that he had missed 4 years of his son's life. "Patricia, I know I have no right to ask, but I'd like to meet him." Her eyes narrowed. She felt a sudden urge to lash out, to remind him of the anguish he caused. But she tempered her anger, thinking only of Elijah. Her son deserved to know his father if Maxwell could prove himself worthy. "I'll consider it," she replied coolly. "But understand, I'm not the person you left crying in the foyer. I have responsibilities now, and my son's well-being comes first." The flicker of sorrow in Maxwell's gaze was undeniable. "I know," he said quietly, "and I know I can't expect your forgiveness." Patricia offered no reply. She picked up her briefcase and turned to leave. As the elevator doors slid closed behind her, she felt a cascade of conflicting emotions swirl in her stomach. She had survived unimaginable heartbreak and built a new life. Was Maxwell truly remorseful? Or was this yet another ploy orchestrated by Crystal? Patricia vowed to keep her guard up. She had lost once, and she would not lose again. The successful meeting with the retailer gave Elijah and Eden a significant boost. Patricia was soon swamped with production orders, marketing deadlines, and brand collaboration invites. Sales soared, and her modest warehouse space bustled with new hires. She poured all her energy into the company, determined to prove she deserved this opportunity. Late nights became the norm, and on some evenings, Elijah would curl up in the office's small play area while she oversaw inventory updates. Yet, the closer she danced with the Lightwood group, the more she sensed a shadow creeping into her life, one that spelled trouble. The final contracts with the retailer were pending Maxwell's signature, and the process dragged out weeks longer than expected. Repeated delays and vague explanations hinted at sabotage. Patricia's suspicions crystallized the moment she received an unmarked envelope at her office. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a grainy photo of her hugging an old male friend. Beneath it was typed, "End your contract pursuit or I will expose your secrets." There were no specifics, but Patricia's gut churned. She recognized the friend in the photo. It was an ex-colleague from her financial firm job, a harmless lunch meeting from years ago. Whoever sent this was either incompetent or desperate, but the threat was real enough. She had no secrets to speak of, but to the gullible public, a twisted narrative could be conjured. She knew exactly who was behind it, Crystal Hartley. Patricia's hand shook as she read the note. She tore it up and tossed it into the shredder. "Bring it on," she muttered under her breath. She refused to let a petty blackmailer derail her success. Instead, she doubled down, meeting with lawyers to safeguard her brand, consulting PR experts to handle any smear campaigns. If Crystal wanted a fight, Patricia was finally ready to give one. To her shock, Maxwell reached out around the same time, requesting a discreet meeting. Against her better judgment, she agreed, provided it was in a public place. They met at a cozy cafe near Patricia's office. Maxwell arrived, looking far more haggard than the polished billionaire she remembered. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and he walked with a subdued posture. "Patricia," he began, voice subdued, "I didn't know about any blackmail attempts. I've heard rumors that Crystal's been using some questionable PR tactics, but she keeps me in the dark. I'm trying to rectify the situation." She studied him, wondering if this was another performance. "Rectify it? You're the CEO of Lightwood Group. You could remove her from power if you wanted." His lips tightened. "It's not that simple. She holds shares, has alliances on the board, and my father's health is failing. There's a lot at stake." Patricia felt a flash of sympathy. She recalled how controlling Crystal could be, weaving herself into every facet of Maxwell's business. But she hardened her resolve. "Your personal drama is no concern of mine. All I ask is that you keep your people out of my path. I won't back down." He nodded, sadness flickering in his eyes. "Understood. And about Elijah, I still want to meet him. Officially, I'd like to be in his life." Patricia stiffened, protective instincts flaring. My son isn't a pawn for you to use whenever you feel guilty. Show me you're trustworthy first. Prove it by reining in Crystal and finalizing the retailer deal, then we can discuss parental rights. With that, she stood and left the cafe. Maxwell remained seated, staring into his cup of coffee as though it held the answers to a labyrinth of regrets. Crystal Hartley was not one to let go easily. Once she learned of Maxwell's repeated attempts to connect with Patricia and their son, she threw herself into damage control mode. Her cunning mind ticked like a clock, churning out new ways to tighten her grip on Maxwell and the Lightwood empire. First, she orchestrated a wave of rumors that Patricia was using Elijah to extort money. Strategic leaks to sensational tabloids painted Patricia as a cunning social climber who had abandoned Maxwell only to reappear when his net worth soared. These salacious stories found an eager audience among gossip columns, though none offered concrete evidence. Patricia combated these fabrications with measured statements through her newly hired PR consultant. She refused to stoop to Crystal's level, instead highlighting her brand's transparency and philanthropic roots. Public opinion gradually tilted in Patricia's favor as many saw her philanthropic track record and recognized the rumors as baseless. Crystal's plan backfired. The tabloids pivoted to question Crystal's motives, and more journalists started digging into her background. While this public relations skirmish took place, Maxwell discovered evidence of Crystal's financial improprieties. He confronted her in a private meeting, brandishing documents that hinted she had embezzled funds to invest in a sketchy offshore venture. She denied everything, but her eyes darted nervously, and Maxwell knew he had cornered her. You lied to me, manipulated my wife, and now you're stealing from the company. Maxwell hissed, voice low. I've tolerated you for too long. Crystal's facade of calm cracked. She pleaded, threatened, and cajoled him, reminding him of how she had once rescued the company from near collapse. Claiming he owed her everything, Maxwell felt nauseated. Even if he had harbored lingering affection or guilt-laden loyalty for Crystal, it evaporated in that moment. I'm done, Maxwell declared. We're done. He would proceed to gather definitive proof of Crystal's corruption before presenting it to the Lightwood Group's board. But ironically, he underestimated her ruthlessness. Crystal still had powerful contacts and an arsenal of secrets, not least of which included knowledge of Maxwell's father's precarious health and a few of Maxwell's own questionable financial moves during the early days of his empire. If she was going down, she intended to bring Maxwell with her. Patricia, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm, focused her energy on finalizing the retailer deal and managing the rapid expansion of Elijah and Eden. She hired a small team, including a marketing manager, a customer service representative, and an operations lead to handle bulk orders. Elijah often toddled around the office, delighting staff with his bright laughter and endless curiosity. In fleeting moments, Patricia allowed herself to feel proud. She had built a safe life for herself and her son, away from the toxic environment that once crushed her spirit. However, she couldn't ignore the subtle sense of being watched. On several occasions, she spotted unfamiliar faces lingering near her office building, or a car idling across the street from her home for hours. She filed a police report, but with no overt threats, the authorities couldn't do much. Patricia remained vigilant, even considering hiring a private security firm. But funds were tight, and every penny she earned went back into her business and Elijah's future. The final push toward chaos arrived in the form of an emergency phone call from an unknown number. When Patricia answered, an anxious voice spilled out Maxwell's. My father's in critical condition. We need to talk, and it can't wait. Her initial response was dismissive. I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't see how it involves me. Maxwell sighed raggedly. He's asking for you. And for Elijah. That gave her pause. Harrison Lightwood had never shown her kindness. Why would he summon her now? Maxwell explained that during one of his coherent moments, Harrison had demanded to see his legitimate grandson before he passed. He had gleaned from scattered rumors that Maxwell had a child, Patricia's child, and had put the pieces together. Reluctantly, Patricia agreed to visit the Lightwood estate. She told herself it was for Elijah's sake, not for Harrison's approval. She wanted her son to decide later in life if he would forge a relationship with his paternal lineage. Besides, she couldn't deny that part of her wanted the family to acknowledge her child's rightful place. She arrived at the mansion days later, Elijah's hand clutched in hers. The sight of the grand estate marble columns, ornate gardens, towering gates sparked a flood of memories, both beautiful and heartbreaking. Staff members ushered her and Elijah up the winding staircase to Harrison's private chamber. Standing outside was Maxwell, shoulders tense, eyes full of quiet desperation. "Thank you for coming," he whispered. Patricia nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Together, they entered the room where a frail Harrison lay, a web of tubes and monitoring devices attached to his body. His gaze flicked to Elijah, and something akin to relief softened his stern features. "Come closer, child," the old man croaked. Patricia gently led Elijah forward. The boy, oblivious to the tension, offered a shy smile. Harrison raised a trembling hand, placing it atop Elijah's curls. Tears glistened in his eyes, though his voice remained coarse. "Lightwood blood runs strong," he murmured. Then he looked at Patricia, pain and regret flickering in his gaze. "I owe you an apology for everything." Patricia couldn't help feeling a twist of pity. She had yearned for acceptance once. Now, seeing the powerful patriarch brought so low, she realized how the illusions of grandeur could crumble like dust. She nodded gently, acknowledging his words, but she was too overwhelmed to speak. Elijah, sensing the solemnity of the moment, pressed his little hand into Harrison's. The old man's eyes fell shut, and he seemed to relax. Patricia had the distinct sense that for all his rigid pride, Harrison felt he could depart in peace, knowing his grandson existed. While the family gathered vigil at Harrison's bedside, Crystal made her final, desperate move. She stormed into the estate unannounced, a flurry of rage and panic. Maxwell, who had spent the night at his father's side, encountered her in the hallway. "You're trespassing," he snapped, voice low to avoid disturbing Harrison. "Get out." Crystal's hair was disheveled, her mascara smeared from tears or lack of sleep. She brandished a tablet displaying certain financial documents, ones that implicated Maxwell in questionable overseas transactions. He recognized them instantly. They predated Crystal's involvement in the company, but they were indeed borderline illicit strategic moves he'd once made to secure vital funding. "Don't you see? You need me," Crystal hissed. "I can bury this evidence or let it come to light. If you cut me off, I'll expose you to the board, to the authorities, to everyone." Maxwell's face paled. For a moment, he felt the cold grip of fear. But then he noticed Patricia standing nearby, Elijah at her side. The boy was peering curiously at the spectacle. Something in Maxwell hardened. He refused to cower any longer in front of the mother of his child. "Enough," Maxwell said. "If you want to expose me, do it. But you'll go down too for the embezzling and blackmail. We both know that." He stepped closer. "I've already secured the real evidence against you, Crystal. You can't manipulate me anymore." Crystal's lips twisted in a venomous snarl. "You fool," she spat. She turned to Patricia, seething with years of pent-up hatred. "And you think you've won because you had his child? You'll only ever be a charity case who lucked out. All of this wealth, this status, none of it was rightfully yours." Patricia stood her ground, though her heart pounded furiously. "I never wanted your version of wealth," she replied in a calm but firm voice. "I built my own." The staff, alerted by the commotion, started to gather. Crystal realized the entire household was witnessing her meltdown. She let out a shriek of frustration, flinging the tablet to the floor. Without another word, she spun around and stormed out, leaving behind a trail of stunned silence. Maxwell stood there, chest heaving, unsure whether to collapse from relief or chase after her to ensure she caused no further damage. Patricia quietly led Elijah away, not wanting him exposed to more chaos. In a distant corridor, she leaned against the wall and exhaled heavily. Despite her best efforts to remain composed, her hands shook. She realized that, in a way, this was the confrontation she had dreaded and anticipated all at once. Crystal was unmasked. Maxwell had chosen a side, and the illusions that once suffocated Patricia were shattered for good. In the days that followed, Harrison Lightwood slipped in and out of consciousness. Maxwell worked tirelessly to ensure the board of the Lightwood Group was prepared for a transition. He also made moves to strip Crystal of her positions, finalizing an internal investigation that revealed her embezzlement. Once the evidence was compiled, Maxwell turned it over to the authorities, effectively shutting her out of the corporate world. A wave of lawsuits followed, culminating in Crystal's dramatic fall from grace. Patricia, meanwhile, maintained her distance, refusing to be drawn into the corporate infighting. Her priority was Elijah. She returned to her daily life running Elijah and Eden, caring for her son and occasionally checking in to see how Maxwell's father was faring. The old man passed away a week later, leaving behind a complicated legacy. His will recognized Elijah as a legitimate Lightwood heir. A portion of the estate, sizable enough to secure Elijah's future, was placed in a trust. Patricia accepted it on her son's behalf, determined to manage it responsibly. Despite everything, Patricia did not seek to rekindle her marriage with Maxwell. The pain was still fresh, and trust was not something she could easily regrow. Maxwell, though regretful, seemed to understand. He expressed a desire to co-parent Elijah, to slowly build a relationship with the child he had neglected for so long. Patricia set strict boundaries, but agreed to let them spend time together under supervised conditions until trust could be established. The tabloids, ravenous for drama, pounced on every detail: Harrison's passing, Crystal's downfall, Maxwell's attempts to reconcile with his estranged wife. But Patricia chose to ignore the media circus, focusing on her brand's swift expansion. Elijah and Eden was thriving, and she soon secured distribution in major department stores across the region. Orders poured in from overseas markets, prompting Patricia to consider international warehouses. In a bittersweet twist, the betrayal that once nearly destroyed her had catalyzed the birth of an empire in her name. Months rolled by. Patricia found a lovely new home, a modest but comfortable house with a backyard where Elijah could play. She decked it with childproof essentials and bright, cheerful decor, the exact opposite of the cold opulence she'd once endured. At night, she'd sit on the porch, sipping tea, a sense of quiet fulfillment washing over her. Maxwell kept his promise to Elijah, showing up for weekend trips to the aquarium, picnics in the park, and birthdays. He seemed genuinely invested in being a good father, and though Patricia remained guarded, she acknowledged the progress. Over time, she allowed him to take Elijah for unsupervised outings, noticing how the boy laughed more freely in Maxwell's presence. As for Crystal, her name surfaced occasionally in scandalous news updates, a court appearance. Here, a rumored affair with a wealthy magnate there. She seemed desperate to claw her way back to relevance, but her track record scared off most credible business partners. Patricia harbored no pity, only the sense that karma had run its course. One evening, Maxwell visited Patricia's new home to drop off Elijah. The boy darted inside, proudly showing Patricia the new toy boat Maxwell had bought him. Alone on the porch, Maxwell lingered awkwardly. "Your house is nice," he said, hands in his pockets. "Thank you," Patricia replied simply. He gazed out at the yard, silent for a moment. Then, in a hushed voice, he said, "I know I can't erase the past, but I want to apologize again for everything. Every day. I wish I had been stronger." Patricia nodded slowly. She felt no desire to rehash the hurt, only a tempered acceptance of what had transpired. "I appreciate that," she replied gently. "Let's just focus on giving Elijah the life he deserves." Their eyes met, an unspoken truce passing between them. Neither knew what the future held, but at least the bitter animosity had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve to move forward separately, yet bound by the love of a child. Life settled into a steady rhythm for Patricia, but the final note of her revenge arrived unexpectedly. She was invited to speak at a prestigious women's entrepreneurship summit in Singapore, where luminaries from various industries would gather to share their journeys. Patricia accepted, hoping her story of overcoming betrayal to build a successful brand might inspire others. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of attendees, she recounted her rise from heartbreak to empowerment, omitting specific names, yet making the moral of her journey crystal clear: never let adversity define you. Always find a way to forge your own path. Her passion and authenticity resonated with the audience, prompting a standing ovation. After her talk, she encountered a group of aspiring female entrepreneurs. One of them, eyes shining with tears, mentioned that she had recently escaped an abusive relationship and found hope in Patricia's resilience. Patricia embraced the woman, reminding herself that her story served a greater purpose than mere revenge. It was a beacon of possibility for those still lost in dark times. Amid the crowd's bustle, she spotted Crystal lurking at the periphery, her once flawless attire replaced by a more subdued, almost desperate look. Their eyes briefly met. In that silent moment, Patricia sensed that Crystal was hearing the ovation, the success, the empowerment, and realizing she had utterly failed to break Patricia. Whatever emotions flickered across Crystal's face, envy, regret, bitterness, Patricia felt a wave of relief that she no longer harbored the same resentments. She had moved on, while Crystal seemed frozen in the wreckage of her own choices. One final swirl of drama ended with the official court settlement. Crystal was found guilty of multiple counts of fraud and faced substantial fines. She narrowly avoided prison time by surrendering all her remaining assets to repay the company and additional plaintiffs. The judge's verdict sealed her fate. She was effectively blacklisted from major industry circles, her reputation irreparably tarnished. By contrast, Patricia's star continued to rise. She expanded Elijah and Eden into a full lifestyle brand, opening flagship stores and securing international distribution. Her philanthropic causes grew, too, allowing her to create scholarships for single mothers striving to launch businesses or return to school. In every interview, Patricia emphasized how adversity had shaped her resilience, turning her from a timid spouse into a formidable business leader. Maxwell maintained his paternal role. He remained financially and emotionally supportive of Elijah, though Patricia didn't permit any illusions of rekindling their romance. They were cordial co-parents who had navigated a tumultuous past to provide a stable future for their son. 7 years after the day Patricia had fled her marriage, she stood at the threshold of her second major expansion. Investors courted her daily, and the media praised her charitable contributions. As she tucked Elijah into bed one night, she remembered the terrified young woman she'd once been, forced out of the Lightwood mansion with nothing but a suitcase and an unborn baby. How far she'd come since then, and how sweet the taste of true independence, built not on borrowed fortunes, but on her own grit and unwavering love for her child. Strength isn't forged in comfort, it's shaped in the crucible of betrayal and loss. Patricia Carlisle's journey from neglected spouse to triumphant entrepreneur shows that true empowerment arises when we reject victimhood. Crystal learned too late that manipulating others for selfish gain leads to an inevitable downfall. Maxwell discovered that fleeting temptations can cost a lifetime of regret, and that fatherhood brings responsibilities no amount of wealth can evade. If you found Patricia's battle for dignity and justice compelling, please support this channel. Every like, share, and subscription helps us bring you more tales of resilience, drama, and triumph. Spread this story to friends who might find hope in Patricia's unwavering determination. By staying engaged, we keep important conversations alive about trust, empowerment, and the reality that no betrayal, however devastating, can suppress a spirit that refuses to yield. Together, let's champion stories that inspire us to seek victory over every adversity.